I believe today is our last stop on the road to Revelation. We should begin the book next week. Oh man, it's kind of crazy. It's been a good study. Like Jordan alluded to in our prayer meeting in the back. The last couple of weeks, when I get done, I feel like I've done a book report because it's been, and the temple was here and it existed in the year 125, and this happened. Thank you. Next. Here's an apple for the teacher. There you go. Just feels weird. But it's all good information, and it's good stuff, and it's good stuff to know, and it actually does something and goes somewhere. So hopefully today will be the last in our preparatory steps to dive in to the book of Revelation. Today we are going to do an overview of the book of Ruth. At one point, I was going to go through it a little more detail, but then I thought, no, the point of going through that detail is actually just to pull out some really, a few pictures. And so I thought, well, let's just look at the pictures and see how it all connects and make that transition next week. So today we are going to go through the book of Ruth. But before we do that, I want to look up 3 key passages in the law that lay a little groundwork for what happens in the book of Ruth. So if you can put the first slide up, Jared. The first verse, set of verses is going to be, go to Deuteronomy 25, verses 5 to 10. Genesis, Exodus, easier said than done. Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Dude. Just got to say it that way, don't you? This has to do with what's called the law of Levirate marriage. Now, when you see Levi, it's got nothing to do with the tribe of Levi. It's something else entirely. But the idea is this: the laws that they had set up, and was also generally custom in ancient times, when a man who was married died, and if he had family, and how the family line was to be set up from there on out. So this is what it looks like in the Mosaic law. It says this, verses 5 to 10. If brothers dwell together, and one of them dies and has no son, the widow of the dead man shall not be married to a stranger outside of the family. Her husband's brother shall go into her, take her as his wife, and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. And it shall be that the firstborn son which she bears will succeed to the name of his dead brother, that his name may not be blotted out of Israel. But if the man does not want to take his brother's wife, then let his brother's wife go up to the gate to the elders and say, my husband's brother refuses to raise up a name to his brother in Israel. He will not perform the duty of my husband's brother. Then the elders of his city shall call him and speak to him. But if he stands firm and says, I do not want to take her, then his brother's wife shall come to him in the presence of the elders, remove his sandal from his foot, spit in his face, and answer and say, so it shall be done to the man who will not build up his brother's house. And his name shall be called in Israel, the house of him who has sandals removed. It's not a Native American name. It's an ancient Israeli name. Family of the unsandaled. That's a good one, too. No shoes for you. The custom was that in order to carry on that male family member's line, the brother of said male family member would marry the wife, and the firstborn son would then carry on the dead guy's line. That's really what we're after. But it's the law of Levirate marriage. It's to preserve family lines and heritage and inheritance and those sorts of things. So we're going to see that in the book of Ruth. The next little bit we want to look up has to do with the law of gleaning. Go to Deuteronomy 24. Just a little bit right before there. 24, what did I say, 19 to 22. Remember, this is a purely agricultural society. Everybody grew food and livestock and things like that. So there was no welfare system as we know it today. So God, of course, caring about the poor and the destitute, works into his law a way for people to survive who have no other means. And it truly was no other means. It was if you lost an arm or a leg in an accident, if you were a widow and had no children and no one else to take care of you. This wasn't welfare like we have today. This was if you had no way to take care of yourself and feed yourself and clothe yourself, God built in a way for the community to take care of such people. Verse 19 of chapter 24. When you reap your harvest in your field and forget a sheaf in the field, the bundle of stuff, you shall not go back to get it. It shall be for the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. In other words, if you leave this out there on purpose, if you forget it, don't go back and get it, because this giving honors God. God will then bless you right back. Verse 20, when you beat your olive trees, you shall not go over the boughs again. It shall be for the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. When you gather the grapes of your vineyard, you shall not glean it afterward. It shall be for the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. And you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore, I command you to do this thing. So in other words, don't go through one gleaning and then go through another and another till you get it all out. It's just go through once, and whatever you miss or decide to leave behind on purpose is for the poor, who would then come in after you, the landowner, had gone through your gleaning, and then they could collect whatever's left. Okay? The third little bit is the law of redemption. For this, we need to go to Leviticus 25. A lot of these are actually duplicated in both Leviticus and Deuteronomy, but I picked these because they are a little bit more in depth in their explanations. 25, verse 47. Redemption. This is specifically, redemption of the land. They didn't. When Israel got into the land and everybody was given their allotment of land, and you read about so-and-so sold a parcel of land, they didn't actually sell the land like we would sell a piece of property today. They technically leased the land. And then after so many years, every 50th year, however how they measured it, everybody's land would go back to whose it was originally. Does that make sense? So it's a temporary lease. It wasn't actually a sale. So this has to do with, what if somebody can't, for some reason, get their land back? Well, this is how you get it back into the family. Verse 47. Now, if a sojourner or stranger close to you becomes rich, and one of your brethren who dwells by him becomes poor, and sells himself to the stranger or sojourner close to you, or to a member of the stranger's family, you know what? I take it back. This actually is personal redemption. This isn't land redemption, but it's all connected. I can find that one later. One of his brothers may redeem him, or his uncle's son may redeem him, or anyone who is near of kin to him in his family may redeem him, or if he is able, he may redeem himself. Thus he shall reckon with him who bought him. The price of his release shall be according to the number of years, from the year that he was sold to him until the year of Jubilee, which is that everything starts over a year. It shall be according to the time of a hired servant for him. I know what I did. I wrote down one of the verses and not the other set of verses that talk about it. So one has to do with land, one has to do with if you made yourself an indentured servant and you wanted to be freed and, set back, and you couldn't free yourself, there was means by which somebody else could free you, could redeem you from your slavery. Okay? So with all that in mind, let's go to the book of Ruth and see what's going on there. Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth. I get the Joshua and the Judges confused. Too many J's. All right, so what we're going to do is actually read. We're going to end up reading the whole book today. It's only 4 chapters, doesn't take very long, but we're going to read and then talk through each chapter. So you get to hear my voice a lot. It's story time. Now it came to pass, it's snoring time, in the days when the judges ruled, that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to dwell in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech. The name of his wife was Naomi. The name of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. You guys say it with the there you go. Careful, don't stain your shirt. Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah. And they went to the country of Moab and remained there. Then Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died. Oh, very good. Thank you for playing along. And she was left and her 2 sons. Now they took wives, the 2 sons, of the women of Moab. The name of the one was Orpah. You might get dyslexic and read Oprah, but it's not Oprah. It's Orpah. And the name of the other, Ruth. And they dwelt there about 10 years. Then Mahlon and Chilion also died. So the woman survived her 2 sons and her husband. You guys are awesome. Then she rose with her daughters-in-law that she might return to the country from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had visited his people by giving them bread. So the famine's over back home. She wants to go back home. Therefore, she went out to the place where she was, and her 2 daughters-in-law with her, and they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. And Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go, return to her mother's house. The Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find rest, each in the house of her husband." So she's essentially trying to let them go. They're not Jews. They're not bound to any of the other stuff. So she's like, just go, find other husbands, have a good life. So she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said to her, "Surely we will return with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Are there still sons in my womb that they may be your husbands?" Remember that Levirate law? Levirate law thing? She doesn't have any more sons to marry off to these daughters. And she's saying, "I'm too old. I can't have any kids. Turn back, my daughters. Go, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, if I should have a husband tonight and also bear sons, would you wait for them till they were grown? Would you restrain yourselves from having husbands? No, my daughters, for it grieves me very much for your sakes that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me." Naomi is a little, that's a good awe moment. She's a little hacked off at God. Verse 14, then they lifted up their voices and wept again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. And she said, "Look," Naomi said, "your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Entreat me, or don't make me leave you, or to turn back from following after you. For wherever you go, I will go, and wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts you and me." Instead of a, "oh," that's more of a, "oh." Moment. Isn't that awesome? What was that? Okay, I was going to say, I heard mother-in-law. I was going to say, be careful. Yikes. When she saw, verse 18, that she was determined to go with her, she stopped speaking to her. That doesn't mean like she's like, "I'm not talking to you anymore." Stop speaking. It was, "Okay, we're done. You're going to come with me." Great. Now the 2 of them went until they came to Bethlehem, and it happened when they had come to Bethlehem that the city was excited because of them, and they said to her, "Is this Naomi?" Which means pleasant, by the way. So we're going to see a little play on words happening here. But Naomi said to them, "Do not call me Naomi, pleasant, but call me Mara, bitter, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, and the Lord has brought me home again empty. Why do you call me Naomi, since the Lord has testified against me and the Almighty has afflicted me?" So Naomi returned. It's like, "Oh, nice to see you too. Okay." They're like, "Welcome back." "Shut up." "Okay." Moab was not kind to you, was it? All right. Don't vacation in Moab. So Naomi returned, and Ruth and the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the country of Moab. Now they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of barley harvest. So it's harvest time. This is Bethlehem, where Jesus was born. This is that same place. Okay. So that was chapter 1. Let's see what we're talking about here. I want to introduce some characters and introduce some of the pictures we're going to be seeing. This is a historical event. These are real people. These things really happened, but they also serve as pictures. I forget what they're all called, but the the Pharisees and teachers of the Bible had 4 different levels of teaching God's word, and one of them was the plain reading of it, and then there's different layers of application and then looking for pictures. So this is of course, a very acceptable way to talk about this. But we have Naomi. Naomi is going to be a picture of Israel, the people of Israel, the nation of Israel. They're going to be she's going to serve as a picture of the Jews that we see through history, the Jewish people, God's chosen people. That's who she is going to be a picture of. Ruth is going to be a picture of the Gentile bride, also called the church. us. She is going to be a picture of that because she is a Moabitess, right? She is a Gentile. She becomes a bride, and that's who she's going to be. We're going to meet a guy by the name of Boaz. And his role, his type, his picture is going to be that of Jesus, of what is here is called a kinsman redeemer. Remember that we read about that little bit about redeeming a man from slavery. There's also the man who, the one who can redeem the piece of land from being under somebody else's lease back to the original owner. So Boaz is going to serve in that role, which is ultimately a picture of Jesus, the kinsman redeemer. Okay, that's our cast of characters. Moving on through Ruth chapter 2. Says this, there was a relative of Naomi's husband, a man of great wealth of the family of Elimelech. His name was Boaz. So Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, please let me go to the field and glean heads of grain after him, in whose sight I may find favor. And she said to her, go, my daughter. So she's going to go find a field. She doesn't know Boaz yet, but she's going to go look for a field to glean so that they have something to eat. Then she left and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And she happened to come upon the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. Now behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem and said to the reapers, the Lord be with you. He's saying, hey, what's going on? And they answered him, the Lord bless you. And they said, nothing. And they're all like, and then they said, and then, okay. Then Boaz said to his servants who was in charge of the reapers, whose young woman is this? So the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered and said, it is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. And she said, please let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves. So she came and has continued from morning until now, though she rested a little in the house. Then Boaz said to Ruth, you will listen, my daughter, will you not? Do not go to glean in another field, nor go from here, but stay close by my young women. Let your eyes be on the field which they reap, and go after them. Have I not commanded the young men not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink from what the young men have drawn. So he's like, hey, stay in my field, follow after my guys, and the other women follow after them to collect all the stuff. And when you get thirsty, get something to drink. It's all good, and no one's going to mess with you. No one's going to touch you. You're perfectly safe here. Verse 10, so she fell on her face, bowed down to the ground, and said to him, why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner? And Boaz answered and said to her, it has been fully reported to me all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, and how you have left your father and your mother in the land of your birth, and have come to a people whom you did not know before. The Lord repay your work, and a full reward be given to you by the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge. Yeah, refuge, a good place to be. Then she said, let me find favor in your sight, my Lord, for you have comforted me and have spoken kindly to your maidservant, though I am not like one of your maidservants. Now Boaz, said to her at mealtime, come here and eat of the bread and dip your piece of bread in the vinegar. Blah. Must have been a cool thing back then, but no, thank you. Dip it in the butter, dip it in the melted cheese. Hebrew fondue. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So she sat beside the reapers, and he passed parched grain to her, and she ate and was satisfied, and kept some back. And when she rose up to glean, Boaz commanded his young men, saying, all right, listen up. Let her glean, even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her. Also, let grain from the bundles fall purposely for her. Leave it, that she may glean, and do not rebuke her. Like, see what's going on? See what I'm doing? Okay. Leave some for her. So she gleaned in the field until evening, and beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley, which is a lot. Then she took it up and went into the city, and her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned. So she brought out and gave to her what she had kept back after she had been satisfied. So she kept a little back for herself, not to sell. And mother-in-law said to her, where have you gleaned today? And where did you work? Blessed is the one who took notice of you. I can't really do an old Jewish mother-in-law. I could probably do a Jewish dude, but I'm not going to do that to you guys. I'm not going to do that with Boaz. So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked and said, "The man's name with whom I worked today is Boaz." Then Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, probably with a big, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not forsaken his kindness to the living and the dead." Now she's happy. She has a plan. Good Jewish mother has a plan. And Naomi said to her, "This man is a relation of ours, one of our close relatives." Now there's a little behind-the-scenes nugget here. She says, a relation of ours. Yes, he is a family member, but then she calls him a close relative. She doesn't mean close on the family tree. The word that's actually being used is a kinsman redeemer. So it's not just communicating how close of a relative. This is a role. This is a title that she is using here, a close relative. Ruth the Moabitess said, "He also said to me, 'You shall stay close by my young men until they have finished with all my harvest.'" And Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, "It is good, my daughter, that you go out with this young man, with his young women," because he's not a young man, he's an older guy, "that people do not meet you in any other field." So she stayed close by the young women of Boaz to glean until the end of barley harvest and wheat harvest, and she dwelt with her mother-in-law. Whew. All right. Going on to paint our picture, one of the little nuggets I want to throw at you guys is that Boaz wanted to know who Ruth was, and so he sent a servant. Do we know the servant's name? No. If this picture is consistent, if Ruth is the Gentile bride and Boaz is the kinsman redeemer, a picture of Jesus, for whatever reason, the Holy Spirit, as he inspired God's word, always portrays himself as an unnamed servant. So here we have Boaz, Jesus, sending the unnamed servant to bring the Gentile bride to himself. Interesting. But here's what we see. Naomi finds hope and provision via Ruth and Boaz. She sees what could happen here, and she sees we're going to be taken care of. There's hope for her. There's hope for me. There's provision. There's going to be food. We're going to be good. Ruth learns of Boaz's ways through Naomi. So if Ruth is the Gentile bride, she learns of Jesus through Israel. Paul says salvation is for the Jew first and then the Gentile, right? You see this picture isn't this just really cool? This really consistent. And we see Boaz as the Lord of the harvest. It's his harvest. They are his fields. He's the one in charge. He gets to say what happens to what, right? Jesus is also, of course, a picture. He's called the Lord of the harvest. But wait, there's more. Let's keep reading chapter 3. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, shall I not seek security for you, that it may be well with you? Now Boaz, whose young women you were with, is he not our relative? In fact, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Therefore, wash yourself and anoint yourself and put on your best garment and go down to the threshing floor." In other words, get all gussied up. Nobody uses that phrase anymore? Come on. "But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. Then it shall be, when he lies down, that you shall notice the place where he lies, and you shall go in, uncover his feet, and lie down, and he will tell you what you should do." Now, if you're a normal, well-adjusted 21st century Christian, you're going, what? Remember, this is a Jewish story. This is a Jewish culture. This is a very Jewish thing that's happening here. Mother-in-law is not telling Ruth to go proposition Boaz. That is not what's happening. What is happening is when she talks about find where he is, when he's asleep, lift up his, what does it say? Garment. Nope. Those places like he shall go and uncover his feet and lie down. The part of the man's outfit, for lack of a better word, the hem around the bottom was his, you could say his ID. That's one way to describe it. When somebody wanted to make a legal transaction, they would take the hem of their garment and actually roll it in like a clay as a signature. And everyone had a different pattern to their woven in, different little things woven on the bottom, different bells or whatever things on the bottom, knots and such. So it was actually his ID. It's also a picture of authority. That's why when David cuts Saul's off the hem off the bottom of his garment, he freaks out. It's not like he just took the bottom of his pant leg. It was like he took his identity, he took his authority, he took his leadership. So when Naomi tells Ruth to go and do this, she is saying to lift up, uncover his feet, take the authority, and the suggestion is that, Boaz, I want to be put under your authority. I want to become one of yours, one of your servants, one of your something. That's what's happening here. It's not this weird, thing. It's weird to us, but to them, this is a perfectly normal, perfectly acceptable, and he will tell you what you should do. And sure, at this point, Ruth has to act on faith. She might not know, like, you want me to do what now? Okay. But she, in obedience, in verse 5, and she said to her, all that you say to me, I will do. So she went down to the threshing floor and did according to all that her mother-in-law instructed her. And after Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was cheerful, he's not plastered, he's just mellow, I don't know. He's happy. End of the day, had a few glasses of wine. Life is good. That's where he's at. He went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain, and she came softly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. And because his heart was cheerful, it apparently did not disturb him. Now it happened at midnight that the man was startled and turned himself, and there a woman lying at his feet. And he said, who are you? Wouldn't that freak you out? That you have kids and they're like right here in the middle of the night? Like, oh my God. Daddy, it's Christmas. It's Halloween. Leave me alone. Go away. It's not yet. Kind of one of those among said, but somebody at your feet, and they'd be like, I lost my place. Who are you? There it is. She said to him, I am Ruth, your maidservant, to take your maidservant under your wing, for you are a close relative. You are a kinsman redeemer. This is that title phrase again. Then he said, blessed are you of the Lord, my daughter, for you have shown more kindness at the end than at the beginning, in that you did not go after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you request, for all the people of my town know that you are a virtuous woman. Now it is true that I am a close relative, a kinsman redeemer. However, there is a relative closer than I. So on the org chart, on the structure, there is somebody who's a step between them to fulfill this role. Stay this night, and in the morning it shall be that if he will perform the duty of a close relative for you, good, let him do it. Notice where his concern is. It's not for himself. It's, I want to see you taken care of, and if he's going to do it, then so be it. But if he does not want to perform the duty for you, then I will perform the duty for you as the Lord lives. Lie down until morning. In other words, let's sleep on it here. Verse 14, so she lay at his feet until morning, and she arose before one could recognize another. In other words, it's probably still dark out, or maybe some others were more cheerful than Boaz was. Then he said, do not let it be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. And he said, bring the shawl that is on you and hold it. And when she held it, he measured 6 ephahs of barley and laid it on her. Then she went into the city. So he sends her off with food, which is actually stuff to sell at market. So that's sort of like a blessing. It's a gift. When she came to her mother-in-law, she said, is that you, my daughter? Then she told her all that the man had done for her, and she said, these 6 ephahs of barley he gave me, for he said to me, do not go empty-handed to your mother-in-law. Then she said, sit still, my daughter, until you know how the matter will turn out, for the man will not rest until he has concluded the matter this day. So it's a big day for Ruth's life. All right, next on our picture, Naomi sees an opportunity for redemption of the land and Ruth. This is not just about marrying Ruth off so she's taken care of. This is also about the land. These two are interconnected. These two are interwoven. Ruth has to make the first move. Did you see that? It wasn't like Boaz could just say, hey, baby, how you doing? It was Ruth is the one who had to come and make the gesture, make the opening move. Boaz has love and compassion and a desire to redeem. So still, we're painting this picture of the gospel. We're painting this picture of Jesus. Jesus has love and compassion. He has a desire to redeem, but we have to come to him and say, Lord, help. I have no land. I have no nothing. I just have me. So what do you say? And we have to put ourselves under his wing. All right, last chapter, chapter 4. Begins like this. Now Boaz, this is the next day. Remember, when they go to the city gate. The city gate is like this. It's the city council hall. That's where all the business was done. That's where all the transaction happened. That's where at the gate where the wall was around the city, that's where stuff came in and out. That's where you sold stuff. That's where you bought stuff. That's where you got permission to do whatever. So that's kind of that's the position this had. Now Boaz went up to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the close relative, the kinsman redeemer who was closer, of whom Boaz had spoken, came by. So Boaz, you can just call him on the phone and say, hey, Fred, can you meet me at the city gate? You kind of had to wait and hope the guy came by, I guess. So Boaz said, come aside, friend, and sit down here. So he came aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, you guys sit down here too. So they sat down. Then he said to the close relative Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, sold the piece of land which belonged to our brother, our relative, Elimelech. And I thought to inform you, saying, buy it back in the presence of the inhabitants and the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not redeem it, then tell me that I may know, for there is no one but you to redeem it, and I am next after you. So he opens with the land. Elimelech, our relative, died. It's his land. Naomi had to sell it to get by. We want it back, so you're first up. And he said, I will redeem it. And North Boaz went oh. All right, round 2. Ding, ding. Then Boaz said, on the day that you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you must also buy it from Ruth, the Moabitess, the wife of the dead, to perpetuate the name of the dead through his inheritance. In other words, you, dude, have to be the Levirate law redeemer guy. You have to then marry Ruth, and the firstborn of Ruth will then be Mahlon, or whatever that guy's name. I forget which one was married to who, but that one's, inheritance and offspring. At which point the guy went, maybe not so much. Verse 6, and the close relative said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I ruin my own inheritance. You redeem my right of redemption for yourself, for I cannot redeem it. Now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm anything, one man took off his sandal and gave it to the other, and this was a confirmation in Israel. Not both, one. I wonder if you saw a guy walking going, oh, he got hosed. Look, there he goes. Watch out for that guy. I don't know. But the nearer kinsman decided not to do it, and so Boaz is now up. Seriously, I lost my place again. Oh, verse 8, right? Okay. Therefore, the close relative said to Boaz, buy it for yourself. So he took off his sandal, and Boaz said to the elders and all the peoples, you are witnesses this day that I have bought all that was Elimelech's and all that was Chilion's and Mahlon's from the hand of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of Mahlon, there you go, good for her, I have acquired as my wife to perpetuate the name of the dead through his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brethren and from his position at the gate. You are witnesses this day. And they all said, aye. And all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. The Lord make the woman who was coming to your house like Rachel and Leah, the two who built the house of Israel. This is Israel's wives, as it were. And may you prosper in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. May your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring which the Lord will give you from this young woman. So they're fully behind it. They're on board. And they say, I hope it works out great for you. Verse 13, so Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And he went into her. The Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord who has not left you this day without a close relative, a kinsman redeemer." Blessed are we all, indeed, for having a kinsman redeemer. "And may his name be famous in Israel, and may he be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, who was better to you than 7 sons, has borne him." Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her bosom and became nurse to him. Also, the neighbor women gave him a name, saying, "This is a son born to Naomi." Then they called his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. Recognize David's name? Now, this is the genealogy of Perez. This goes all the way back to Perez, which is its own Jerry Springer Bible story from Genesis 38, which you should read sometime and go, "Dude, really?" Oh, man. Little genealogy for it. Hezron begot Ram, and Ram begot Amminadab. Amminadab begot Nahshon, and Nahshon begot Simon or Salma. Salmon begot Boaz, and Boaz begot Obed. Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot David. That is the book of Ruth. Now, at the end of our little portrait here, we find this, that Naomi, or Israel, meets Boaz, Jesus, through Ruth, the Gentile bride. We're kind of moving to like an end times thing here now, where right now God seems to be working through the church for the most part, but it's through his body that others, including Israel, come to meet him. Ruth, the Gentile bride, becomes the willing bride of Boaz. This wasn't forced on her. She had a choice. She had an option, as we all do. God doesn't force himself on anyone. If anything, this is all done out of love, out of a desire to redeem, out of a desire to save. We just have to accept the offer. Boaz, the kinsman redeemer, you'll notice, needs to be able. In other words, he needs to be eligible. In our story here, he was not the first eligible. The option was given to the first, and he opted out, and so now that made him eligible. He had to be eligible and willing. The first guy was eligible but not willing. Boaz was both eligible and willing. That's Jesus. He is able, he is eligible, and he is willing to do so. In fact, when Jesus was confronted with the cross, he says, "No one takes my life from me, but I lay it down willingly," of his own accord, of his own desires. So this, on its own, is a tremendous love story, isn't it? It's just a beautiful little, for us, it's like an outline, but this would be an amazing, someone could take this and adapt it to a modern storyline or whatever. I think that'd be a really cool thing, but I'm a dude and I can't say that, so it's, you ladies can run with that. It's Boaz and Ruth, it's so beautiful. Shh, stop it. Pull it together, Corby. Sorry, okay. Ruth becomes, Ruth. This also provides some history and some insight into Jesus' genealogy. I mean, this goes all the way back to the twisted thing with Judah and Tamar. Also in here, but not listed, is Rahab from the incident at the wall of Jericho. She's related to Boaz. And then, of course, all the way down to Jesse and David, down to Jesus. But how does this connect to the book of Revelation? Well, if you want to turn to Revelation chapter 5, next slide for me, Jer. Revelation 5, we encounter what is essentially the same situation where there is a kinsman redeemer needed to fulfill the obligation. I'm not going to explain a lot of the symbolism because we talked about some of it. I'm just going to hit some of the highlights as we read along. Revelation 5, verse 1. And I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll written inside and on the back, sealed with 7 seals. We talked about that, I think, in week 2. Then I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the scroll and loose its seals?" Now, when you see the word worthy here, it's easy to jump to something like who is of value, who is glorious enough, because we know Jesus is the one, and of course Jesus is worthy of all the glory and honor and power, all that stuff. But that's not really what this angel is getting at. And he's actually getting at who is eligible to open the scroll. Because remember, we talked about that a scroll written on the inside and the outside is actually a legal document, and it's a sealed legal document, and the stuff that's written on the outside defines who is eligible or what are the eligibility requirements. I've never said the word eligible so many times in one day in my whole life. It's a lot of syllables. So it's not worthy in the sense of who's good enough, it's who is eligible to open the scroll and to loose its seals. And no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look at it. So I wept much, verse 4, because no one was found eligible, worthy, to open and read the scroll or to look at it. But one of the elders said to me, "Do not weep. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, who is," come on, Sunday school, thank you, "has prevailed to open the scroll and loose its 7 seals. And I looked, and behold, in the midst of the throne of the 4 living creatures, and in the midst of the elders, stood a lamb as though it had been slain." This is a picture of Jesus, "having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits sent out into all the earth. Then he came and took the scroll out of the right hand of him who sat on the throne." And the rest of the book is about him opening these scrolls. Jesus is the kinsman redeemer. He was the one, the only one who was worthy. He's the only one who was eligible to open that scroll. This is why Ruth is very, very relevant, because it paints a beautiful picture of the love story behind what's happening in the book of Revelation. It's easy to make Revelation about this weird prophecy and 7 horns and eyes and freaky creatures. Revelation itself is the end of the ultimate love story, isn't it? So, in order to qualify as a close relation, Jesus had to become a human being. Like, why did God have to put on a man suit? Why did God have to come in the flesh? This is why it's important that Jesus did come as a man. He wasn't just a spirit. He wasn't just this, disembodied thing that some groups like to teach. He was a physical human being. Jesus, God, had to become man so that he would be related both to God and to man. Do you see the connection? That's the only way that anyone could be a kinsman redeemer. It's the only way anyone would have the authority, have the right, have the ability, the eligibility to fulfill this. That's why he came. That's why he came the way that he came. That's why he came through the people through whom he came, Judah and all the way down through Mary ultimately. That's why Jesus had to do that. So that's how it's related to Revelation. That's why it's important to understand Ruth, to have a better understanding of what is happening overall in Revelation. But like we also talked about, Ruth is also a picture of God's master plan. The law provides a means of grace. What we see in the law are these laws of redemption, the Levirate marriage, the laws of gleaning. It's through the law that grace is even possible. Isn't it weird to think about it like that? Because we're not saved by law, we're not saved by the works, we're saved by grace, we know that. But it's through God's own law that grace becomes possible, that forgiveness becomes possible, that compassion becomes possible. Ruth, Gentiles, the church, learns of their Redeemer, Jesus, through Israel. Israel was chosen to be a light. They were chosen to be God's people. They were God's special treasure, it says in Exodus, that through Israel, the rest of the world would come to see God and come to know God, and through whom, of course, Jesus came. It's all through that. Naomi, Israel, meets the Redeemer through Ruth, which is, it's not like a hard and fast, you could nitpick that statement apart, but it's through his bride that the world comes to know Jesus. Ruth does not replace Naomi. In other words, the church does not replace Israel. That's an important distinction I don't need or want to get into here, but there are those who think that when the Messiah came and the nation of Israel rejected its Messiah, and so he decided to work through the church, that God somehow replaced Israel with the church. And so now all the promises that applied to Israel now apply to the church, and that's Might's true in some cases, and there's some general principles that are true, but there are still many promises that God made to the nation, the people, the land of Israel that he has yet to fulfill. And to say that those have been transferred to the church is, in a way, calling God a liar. To say that he's not going to do what he said he's going to do. That's them's fighting words. I mean, that's kind of what it boils down to. So Ruth does not replace Naomi. She's part of the picture. No matter how much Boaz loved Ruth, he had to wait for her move. So Jesus loves to the point of giving his own life, but he's not going to force that love on anyone. He's going to wait for people to recognize, I need you, I'm going to come to you. And as I alluded to a second ago, the land is restored to Naomi. The land will one day be restored to Israel. God promised them from the Mediterranean to the Euphrates, which is in the middle of modern-day Iraq, and they have yet to occupy all that land. But because God promised that it's going to happen, somehow it's going to happen. Might be in the millennium, might be before all that goes down, I don't know, but that's one of those things to watch for. That's God's master plan of salvation. And we can also look at a picture of God's personal plan of salvation for you and for me. We need redemption. We do. We need to be redeemed. We're lost. We're in slavery. We have lost whatever we own. We think that those are just pictures, of course, but we need to be redeemed. We can't redeem ourselves. The problem we have is not a works being good enough problem. The problem we have is a nature problem. Where, if an apple tree is bad and unhealthy, it's going to produce bad and unhealthy apples, right? That's us. That's what we are. That's what we do. We can't fix ourselves. We need to be redeemed by someone else. And that someone has to be eligible, has to be willing, and has to be a kinsman. Jesus. That's it. He's the only one who could. He's the only one who can. He's the only one who wants to. And when you enter into a relationship like that, you become, and I know this is weirder for guys to hear probably, but you become his bride. You become married to him in a very real way. And in a marriage relationship, everything is done out of love. It should not be done out of fear. It should not be done out of manipulation. It should not be done out of obligation. It should always all be done out of love. And to close, I want to go to Ephesians 5. Some of you may be thinking, Ephesians 5, that's about marriage. Well, it is about marriage, but actually the primary point of this passage is not about marriage. The primary point of the passage is about our relationship with Jesus. Paul says so himself at the very end. You might be surprised to see. Paul, talking about marriage and the church, says, wives, submit or cooperate with your own husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as also Christ is the head of the church. That's what he's really talking about. And he is the Savior of the body. Therefore, just as the church is subject to Christ, so let wives be to their own husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her, that he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of water by the word, that he might present her to himself, a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that he should be holy and without blemish. She should be holy and without blemish. So husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. This is about Jesus and us primarily, and marriage is sort of part of the package here. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it. Look at me. Just as the Lord does the church. For we are members of his body, of his flesh, and of his bones. For this reason, quoting Genesis, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. Isn't it interesting how Boaz observed about Ruth that she left father and mother and God's, that she walked away from all of that and changed her identity completely to be in this new place. That's, again, what it is with us. Verse 32, this is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Christ and the church. There it is. It's about Christ and the church. That's what Jesus did and does for us. That's what our relationship with him should look like. That's the relationship you can have with him, is one like that. So you can ask yourself, do I have that? Am I living my walk with him as his bride? He gave himself for me. Am I giving myself over completely to him? He gave his body for me. Am I giving myself again over completely to him? Not out of fear, not out of manipulation, not out of abuse, not out of any other weirdness that can come along with human marriage, but out of genuine love. Do you have that? God wants you to have that. Just like Boaz wanted that with Ruth. Same thing, same picture. If you don't have it, you can have it. You just, it might sound too simplistic, but you just got to do it. You just got to make a choice. I am going to do that. I do really want that. You don't just say, it'd be nice to have that, and then bling, it happens. It's not an I dream of Jeannie, thing. It's just, it'd be nice. I wish I was 50 pounds lighter. Still doesn't work. But if I just chose to do it, sorry, this is a therapy session again, it would be a little different thing. But really, Boaz, Jesus is waiting for you to come, and as weird as it sounds, uncover his feet and put yourself under his authority, under his love, under his care, or as they put it, under his wings.